And now I yield to the gentleman from Texas.
I thank the chairman for yielding. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you for yielding. I am supportive of this rule. I can think of a better rule. I would have liked the rule to be more open. I had a substitute for the particular amendment that we're posing to the Constitution, but that will not be permissible. But I will vote for the rule. But I have to compliment the authors of this legislation, recognizing that this cannot be done with legislation, that we have to alter the Constitution. Because if you write legislation, obviously it would not be constitutional. So therefore, I think this is, the authors of the proposal should be complimented. Also, they deserve some credit for courage, because it is my understanding that this will be the first time that we will alter the Bill of Rights. And in doing so, I think we should do this with a great deal of thoughtfulness. The courts, as we know, have quite frequently limited our freedom of speech. This is why we have the Istock Amendment. We do not, the courts have ruled out voluntary prayer in schools, so we're trying to compensate for that with the Istock Amendment, and I'm a supporter of that. But this amendment is quite different. Instead of expanding the right of free expression, this is curtailing the right of free expression, and for that reason I will be opposing the legislation. We have no flag crisis, and I'm quite concerned that once this is passed in the Constitution, it might incite more flag burnings and more flag desecration. Actually, under the Constitution, a more permissible way and more proper way of dealing with the problem that the courts have presented us is for we as a Congress to withhold the jurisdiction from the courts, then allow the states to write the legislation that was ruled unconstitutional. Matter of fact, even this amendment is proposed, we could change 2 words and make it an acceptable amendment to those of us who interpret the Constitution in a strict manner. All we would have to do is that the states could write the laws instead of Congress. The First Amendment starts out that said the Congress will write no laws. Congress will make no laws restricting freedom of expression. But here, last time this amendment came up, they included the states. It said that Congress and the states could write the regulations and the rules. But now it says only the Congress. I thought we were for less government. I thought we were for less centralization, less police forces up here. I'm quite sure that this will become the job of the BATF. I guess we'll have a BATFF next, because they will have to police the flag abuse. And there's a lot of reasons why we should oppose this. One is that it's not only a freedom of speech issue, it's also a property rights issue. Withholding and restricting flag burning of other people's flags and government-owned flags and on government property, that certainly is legitimate. But freedom of speech and freedom of expression depends on property. We don't have freedom of expression of our religion in other people's churches. It's honored and respected because we respect the ownership of the property. The property conveys the right of free expression, as a newspaper would or a radio station. But once we deal with the property, no matter how noble the gesture, I think that we have to be very, very cautious in this manner. And the original intent of the founding fathers and in this Constitution, and in writing the Constitution, was never that we would be so involved in writing regulations and legislations on free expression and an attack on private property ownership. And then again, it really defies the 9th and 10th Amendment. We would be much better off taking the part of the Constitution that allows us to remove the jurisdiction from the courts, and thus then permitting the states to write the laws as they see fit. And I yield back.
Let me just say, in recognizing the next speaker, that certainly this member of Congress would stand and defend any American citizen's right to the freedom of speech. I don't consider burning the American flag an expression of speech. I think it is a hateful tantrum. And I would yield to a very distinguished member from Florida, Mr. Stearns, 3 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank my colleague. It's probably appropriate that I come to speak after my colleague on this side of the aisle spoke. He talks about amending the Bill of Rights, and that's not what we're doing here. He talks about protecting the First Amendment. let me point out to him that freedom of speech is not absolute. He might believe that freedom of speech is absolute, but it is not. It has never been. That's why we have on the books obscenity laws. We have on the books public decency laws. So when he talks about the freedom of speech being absolute, I don't agree with him.
Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Texas.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks. Much has been said about this issue being a freedom of expression issue, and it certainly is. Obviously, the American Legion that burns a flag does it differently than the hoodlum on the street. So it does involve an expression of some idea. So we are limiting that ability for any individual to make this expression. And I am convinced that this is historic. This is the first time that we have worked hard in undermining the Bill of Rights. And some have said that the First Amendment can't be absolute, but in some ways it can be. What you say and do in your home and in your church should be absolute, and you should be able to say and do things. The restrictions on speech is when you get involved in lying and slandering and doing harm that way. Yes, then there is a limitation, but that's different. When we're in our churches, we should have absolute right of freedom of speech. But there's more to this than freedom of expression. I see this as a property rights issue, and that's why I'm so disappointed with some of my colleagues who have pushed this as an amendment, because this is an attack on property rights. The question seems to be asked very rarely, but should be asked, who owns the flag? If somebody burned a flag, who owns the flag? They're saying everybody owns it. How does that happen? Can't we buy a flag anymore? Do we believe in collectivism now? That everybody owns the flag and everybody's responsible for it and everybody will do exactly as we're told? That is not part of our system. We guarantee the right of free speech through property rights, through the reverence that we give to our churches or our radio stations or our newspapers. But nobody has the right to march into our church. To see that this amendment is actually worse than the last amendment that came to this House floor. Because at least the last amendment recognized that maybe the states could write regulations. Under the original Constitution and the original intent of the Constitution, it would have been permissible for states to write regulations of this sort. It was our courts that have come in and started to over-regulate freedom of speech and freedom of expression. For instance, I'm quite comfortable in agreeing with the Istock Amendment. I think the courts, because again, we have lost the concept of property in our public schools. You know, in a private school, we know what we're allowed to do. But in a public school, everything becomes fuzzy. So the courts come in and says, all of a sudden, oh, you can't even have a voluntary prayer. So the Istock Amendment approach is completely opposite of what we're doing here, because this is restriction of expression. It's a restriction on the private property ownership, and it really attacks the 9th and 10th Amendment. Because before, even where the states had been permitted to write laws, they are not permitted under this legislation. Only the Congress shall make the laws. I thought we were supposed to make the federal government smaller as conservatives, not bigger. Here we are adding a new role for the BATF. We have the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and we're going to have a BATFF in order for those individuals to go out and regulate the flag use. And this is federal. Just think of how the RICO laws may apply to this. One individual in one group may do something wrong. Everybody in that group can be held guilty for that. What if there happens to be someone in there that has done it deliberately in order to get at the group? Could there be entrapment? Has our FBI ever been known to do this? I think it's a rather dangerous thing that we are doing. And why are we so fearful? Why are we so fearful? It is implied at times that we have to, if we do not endorse this amendment, we're less patriotic than the others. I think that's wrong to imply that we might be less patriotic. From my vantage point of having been involved in politics for a few years, the real attack are on our liberties. The real attack in this institution is the attack on the Constitution. And this does nothing to address it. It's almost like window dressing. We're upset and feel guilty and we're in a mess. We can't do anything. Aha, all we need to do is pass a flag amendment and it's going to solve the problem of the attack on the Constitution, which is continuous and endless. We do not need more legislation like this. We do not need an amendment to the Constitution that will, for the first time, alter the Bill of Rights. I really think those individuals who are pushing this have courage to get out front and say, yes, for the first time, we will curtail the authority or the expressions and the rights of the Bill of Rights. I yield that.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to recognize the gentleman from Texas for 1 minute, Mr. Paul.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you for yielding. I would like to point out that the word desecrate is a very important word, and we've talked about it all day, but we haven't yet defined it. It means to deconsecrate. What I'd like to know is when we had consecrated the flag, we're holding the flag in the highest of esteem, and yet liberty is really what should be on the pinnacle. Liberty in the Constitution. When we undermine the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we undermine liberty, and then we diminish the value of the flag. But to deconsecrate something means that the flag was consecrated. I'd like to just read what that means. It says to make, declare, or set apart as sacred, or such as a church, to set apart for the worship of a deity, to change the elements of bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. Who and when did we raise this flag to this level? Have we deified the state to this extent? We very often complain about the state taking over parental rights, and here we are now saying that to do anything to the flag is a desecration, which means that we have consecrated the flag. To desecrate means to abuse the sacredness of the subject of sacrilege, that we cannot commit blasphemy. I think we should be very... Does the gentleman have any more time?
Time of the gentleman has expired.